Hi everyone, this is Tish Aiken and I'm here to discuss today's new moon in Libra. I was almost going to say Scorpio, but it's a new moon in Scorpio that occurs at 11:47 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and it's going to occur at 15 degrees of Libra. Now, it's interesting because this new moon defers back a few years ago when we were having the Pluto-Uranus squares that started in June of 2012 and completed on March 17th of 2015. And that last one in March of 2015 was at 15 degrees of Cardinal. Pluto, which is death and rebirth, was at 15 degrees of Capricorn, forming a challenging square to Uranus, which was in Aries, then at 15 degrees of Cardinal. So the idea is we're kind of picking up from that story that we worked on for a few years of death and rebirth and waking up and lots of letting go. Certainly the Scorpio story is very emphasized in this new moon, and Pluto rules Scorpio because the new moon in Libra is now has Venus, which is the ruler of Libra. Venus stationed retrograde officially on October 5th at 10 degrees and 48 minutes of Scorpio, and Venus is going to be retrograde until November 16th. And so this new moon, on one level, certainly new moons are always a good time to set intentions and to plant seeds and to initiate new beginnings. There's a lot of cardinal energy in this new moon. We have 3 planets in Libra. The sun and the moon are in Libra, as is Mercury, which is the planet of communication and how we view things. Mercury is forming an opposition to Uranus in Taurus, out of sign, but Mercury opposite Uranus is very erratic. It can be very unpredictable. It can be brilliant and innovative energy if used well, but people will be acting high-strung, and obviously we can see on the world stage a lot is happening, and I think that energy is going to be blowing up this week realistically. And the new moon in Libra is very much about partnerships and about finding what's of value, because Venus rules Libra, and Venus is what is of value, what you want to do, what you enjoy, what you love, how you're valued and how you're loved. And I think that this retrograde we're clearing the shadow of Mars retrograde, which I talked about a lot over the summer. The Mars energy has been so rampant in so many ways, but Mars clears its shadow on October 10th, meaning that it passes the degree that it's stationed retrograde on. So Mars was at 9 degrees of Aquarius on the summer solstice, and right after that it went retrograde on the 27th. So now Mars is going to reach 10 degrees of Aquarius on October 10th, and we're moving forward with that story. But as Mars clears its shadow, Venus is now retrograde. So now we have another big retrograde to work on this year. And so we had 7 planets retrograde during the summer. This new moon chart has the cardinal energy, which is good for launching. It has Cancer ascendant, which is a cardinal sign, and the midheaven is at the world axis at 0 degrees of Aries. So I imagine there'll be a lot of public events that are very big. And Chiron, which is the wounded healer, is right conjunct the midheaven of this chart. And so I think a lot of people are feeling in pain right now, and with Venus retrograde in Scorpio, where it's in its detriment, it's not a strong placement for Venus. It's a painful placement, actually. And with Venus in Scorpio, it's already bringing up issues, shadow issues, whether it's something that you're working on internally, or if there are memories coming up, or if you're evaluating a relationship that's no longer working. This is all going to surface very strongly, and I'll be talking a lot more about it this fall, as will every astrologer, I imagine. But I think the idea is that we have to figure out, all of us, how can we be more loving, how can we be more kind, but also to ourselves. Because if we're, if with all of this that's gone on, if there were issues of anger that surfaced with the Mars South Node energy, with Mars very strongly placed in the second of the 2 eclipses, of both of those eclipses rather, all of that energy, we're letting go of that. But now with Venus retrograde in Scorpio, she's in a pretty pernicious placement. She's pretty angry there, and Venus is squaring Mars this week, and in the new moon chart, Venus is square Mars. So again, there's a conflict with the feminine and the masculine. And Venus is also, what I find interesting is that Venus is right now at 10 degrees of Scorpio. And so it goes back to a solar eclipse that we had on November 3rd of 2013. So if you think back to about 5 years ago, there was a solar eclipse a total solar eclipse at 11 degrees of Scorpio, and that is being set off right now with Venus. So if there were lessons you were working on or awakening that you experienced during that time, that also could be coming up. And also Saturn was in Scorpio at that time. So Saturn initially reached 10 degrees and 11 degrees of Scorpio in January of 2013, and then it cleared that degree in October of 2013, right before that solar eclipse. So again, right now we're very much reliving the Saturn and Scorpio journey in the middle of that, you know, because Saturn was in Scorpio from 2012 until September of 2015. And so we're working on the middle part of that Saturn story. And we're also completing Venus retrograde. When Venus retrograded in Scorpio on October 8th of 2010 at 13 degrees of Scorpio, and stationed direct on November 18th at 27 degrees of Libra. And this is the same direction we're taking. We're starting off with Venus in a painful placement. So I think in order for us to work out some of these wounds, that Saturn and the Venus retrograde from 2010, and we're all working on, this is reinforcing the story. But in contrast to that time, now we have Jupiter, which brings enlightenment and brings expansion, and even if it expands painful stories, is the idea to bring optimism and hope. And so Jupiter is going to leave Scorpio soon. It's going to leave before the end of the retrograde. Jupiter is going to enter Sagittarius, which is the sign it rules, on November 8th. And I think that's something we all need desperately, because it's a sign that gives us optimism. It educates. It's about seeing the big picture. It's about having joy and more levity and expansion and learning, higher learning. And so hopefully this is going to be helpful to all of us, because we need to have hope, you know. And right now, though, I think it's very much about shadow issues. And this week, although the new moon is always a good time, and new moon in Libra is a good sign for partnering, but I think this is going to be a very tricky week. So I think that it's more about trying to work on past issues and going slowly with things, because on Wednesday we're going to have the moon entering Scorpio early in the morning, and then the moon is going to meet up with Mercury. Mercury is entering Scorpio this week on October 9th, and it's going to be in Scorpio through the end of October. So that's the other thing. Mercury is our perspective, and with Mercury and Scorpio, it's a very perceptive and emotional placement of Scorpio. It really is intense and really can get to the bottom of things, but it can also be a bit of a dark placement of Mercury. Very good for investigation and for researching things. But again, for figuring out what your story is around this Venus retrograde, if you're feeling you want to reevaluate how you're doing things, if you want to reassess if you're being creative. For me, I realized at the end of the summer, and I have a stellium of planets in Libra, so I'm feeling it very strongly, and my midheaven is ruled by Libra, and my Venus is in Libra right on my midheaven. So for me, I realized right before Venus retrograded that I really am not feeling very creative. I'm having a lot more trouble writing and focusing on what I really enjoy doing. So I have to figure out how to manage my time more effectively to be more creative, and so that's, I think, part of what I'm seeing in this. And for everybody, it's going to be something different. Whether or not it hits planets of yours, it's going to fall in some area of your chart, and you want to backtrack to what was going on in 2013 when Saturn and the eclipses were in Scorpio, lighting up this placement of Venus. You want to see what was going on with the Pluto-Uranus square, the final one in March of 2015. because that's setting off this new moon, or the new moon is rather setting off that degree. So see if there was something you were working on that spring, because a lot of people went through changes with the Pluto-Uranus squares that went on. There were 7 of them from 2012 to 2015. And I think that the other idea too is that, you know, Jupiter finishing up Scorpio. Again, you really want to work with this energy. On Wednesday, we're going to have Venus forming an exact square to Mars. So that is combative energy. Mercury is going in Scorpio, is going to form an exact opposition to Uranus and Taurus. And Mercury, Uranus, again, can be very unpredictable. People could get angry very easily with the Venus-Mars energy. That's conflict already. And then you've got the Mercury-Uranus opposition, so people can be very combative. Channel the creative part of it. Venus-Mars, even if they're in conflict, can produce very creative work. And Mercury-Uranus can be genius. So try to tap into that and slow down. And a lot of times when I say these things and I write these things, I don't always heed them, but myself, and we all learn, you know, by this, but I think it's trying to figure out, we're all works in progress, you know, and that's what this is about too. And not maligning yourself if you're not getting all the lessons immediately, and if there are painful things getting brought up. Some people say to me, I thought I worked on this issue. I thought that this was clear. Well, you know, I think that for several years this has been reinforced in many different ways. And so I think give yourself a chance, but figure out what's not working. You may not want to clear the decks on relationships and people with whom you work or how you're doing things, but you might want to try to spend more time reflecting on what your direction is when Jupiter goes into Sagittarius, because that's a time that you can really manifest and magnetize what you want. And it's going to be in Sag from November 8th until December 3rd of next year. And then Venus is going to Venus is going to leave Scorpio, it's going to station direct on November 16th, but it's going to clear its shadow in the middle of December. And at that time, we're going to have a lot more forward momentum. And this has been a year that we began with no planets retrograde. And then, as you all know, we had several planets retrograde, and really trying to figure out what these lessons are. And I think that's going to take a while for all of us. And it's a very tumultuous time. And I think just trying to be kind. And I wish you all a lot of luck, and take care.